The cold autumn wind howled through the empty streets of New York City, carrying an eerie silence that made people quicken their steps. Inside a dimly lit university library, Ethan Vance, a brilliant but cynical criminal psychology student, sat alone near the back corner. He was exhausted by the failing justice system, watching monsters walk free on technicalities while the innocent suffered. That was the night his life changed forever. The night a heavy, charcoal black leather notebook fell from absolute nowhere, landing right in front of his desk with a dull, echoing thud. The cover was blank, except for 2 words written in a disturbing, jagged silver font that seemed to shimmer under the pale fluorescent light. Death Note.
Ethan laughed softly to himself, thinking it was a prank by some classmates. But curiosity got the better of him as he opened the yellowed, ancient-feeling pages. The first page contained rules written in blood-red ink, stating that the human whose name is written in this note shall die within 40 seconds of a sudden, brutal cardiac arrest. Believing it to be a psychological joke, Ethan thought of a notorious serial killer who had just been acquitted that morning due to a corrupt judge.
With a smirk, Ethan grabbed his pen and wrote the killer's full name, imagining the man's arrogant face as he walked out of the courtroom. Exactly 40 seconds later, the library's old television screen flickered to life with a breaking news alert showing the exact same killer collapsing on the street, clutching his chest in absolute agony as his eyes rolled back.
Ethan's breath hitched in his throat, his heart hammering against his ribs like a trapped bird as he stared at the freshly dried ink on the page. Suddenly, the temperature in the room plummeted to sub-zero, and the shadows in the corner of the library began to twist, stretch, and detach themselves from the wall. A low, raspy, gravelly laughter vibrated through the floorboards, sending a wave of primal terror straight down Ethan's spine. Out of the darkness materialized a monstrous, 9-foot-tall entity with pale, decaying skin stretched tightly over a skeletal frame. Its eyes were massive, glowing yellow orbs with pinprick red pupils that burned with sadistic amusement, and a jagged, permanent grin tore across its face, revealing rows of razor-sharp black teeth. This was Ryuk, a Shinigami, a literal god of death who had grown deeply bored with the underworld and dropped his notebook into the human realm just to watch the chaos unfold. Ryuk whispered in a voice that sounded like grinding stones, telling Ethan that the book now belonged to him. But every soul he took would slowly rot Ethan's own mind until nothing was left. Instead of running away in terror, a dark, dangerous ambition ignited inside Ethan's eyes as he realized he finally possessed the ultimate weapon to cleanse the world. Over the next few weeks, a terrifying wave of sudden, unexplained heart attacks swept across the United States, targeting rapists, murderers, and corrupt politicians who thought they were untouchable. The media quickly dubbed this unseen, omnipresent executioner as Kira, a name derived from the word killer, and the public became deeply divided between worshiping him as a god and fearing him as a demon. But Ethan wasn't just writing names anymore. He was becoming addicted to the absolute power of life and death. Spending every waking hour staring into the notebook, he began to change physically, his skin turning unnaturally pale, dark hollow circles forming under his bloodshot eyes, and a cold, emotionless detachment replacing his humanity. Ryuk hovered over him constantly, like a demonic shadow, eating apples with terrifying crunches and reminding Ethan that a grand detective was closing in on his location. That detective was known only by the pseudonym L, a reclusive, faceless, who operated entirely in the dark.
and had never failed to solve a case. Elle recognized the patterns immediately, realizing that Kira was not a supernatural force operating from afar, but a human being located right within the metropolitan area. The psychological warfare between Ethan and Elle turned into a suffocating game of cat and mouse, where a single misstep meant a gruesome death or permanent imprisonment. Elle broadcasted a fake television stream using a condemned criminal as bait, and when Ethan instantly wrote the man's name, Elle narrowed down Kira's exact city and psychological profile within minutes. Ethan realized he was no longer just fighting for justice. He was fighting for his own survival against an opponent who was just as brilliant as he was.
To make matters worse, the horror intensified when a second death note appeared in the city, held by a chaotic, unhinged pop idol named Mia, who was completely obsessed with Kira. Mia had made the ultimate horrific bargain with her own Shinigami, cutting her remaining human lifespan in half just to obtain the Shinigami eyes.
These eyes allowed her to see the true name and exact death date of any human being floating right above their heads, making her a lethal weapon. Mia tracked Ethan down, offering her absolute loyalty. But her reckless, bloodthirsty nature threatened to expose Ethan's identity to Elle's rapidly closing task force. As the pressure mounted to an unbearable breaking point, Ethan's sanity completely fractured, and he decided to orchestrate a master plan that would eliminate both Elle and Mia in one final horrific stroke. He manipulated Mia's fragile emotions, forcing her to write names that would draw Elle out into the open, while secretly planning to betray her the moment she became a liability. On a rainy midnight, inside a deserted, multi-story concrete warehouse, Elle finally cornered Ethan, standing face to face with the young man he had suspected for months. Elle looked at Ethan with deep sorrow and chilling certainty, stating that Ethan had become the very monster he originally sought to destroy. Ethan let out a manic, echoing laugh that didn't sound human anymore, raising his pen to write Elle's true name, which he had finally discovered through Mia's stolen files. But just as the metal tip touched the paper, Elle revealed his final trap. The notebook in Ethan's hand was a highly detailed counterfeit, and the real one was already in FBI custody. In that absolute moment of defeat, the shadows around them erupted into a freezing, violent vortex as Ryuk descended from the ceiling, his yellow eyes gleaming with cruel disappointment. Ryuk reminded Ethan of the very first rule they spoke of, that when a human's time with the notebook comes to an end, the Shinigami is the one who writes that human's name. With a horrific, mocking laugh, Ryuk pulled out his own black notebook and slowly wrote Ethan Vance's name in giant, sweeping letters. Ethan instantly collapsed to the cold concrete floor, his hands clawing desperately at his chest as his heart rhythm shattered into absolute chaos. As his vision faded into eternal darkness, the last thing Ethan saw was not the face of justice, but the monstrous, grinning face of the death god, whispering that human beings are nothing more than beautiful, tragic entertainment.